Hello and welcome to an Unexpected Podcast. My name is Tim. With me as always, I have Matt and Devin. On this week's episode, we have Rob coming back with us. Unfortunately, Rainier and Mick couldn't make it this week. On this week's episode, we're going to be talking about the new Quest for the Ringbearer book that just came out. So my first question to you guys is, what do you guys think, initial thoughts on the book when it was coming out?
Well, I have to say that one of the things that I did not expect, and I'm very excited for, is the Fantasy Fellowship that they threw in there. I'm not really sure why I'm excited for it, other than, like, I don't know, just the thought of creating my own fellowship is really cool. So that's something that I thought that it was great that Jay put a lot of time into, because, I mean, it would have been very easy to just have the Fantasy Fellowship run around with the scenarios that he had in the book, which would have been fine, honestly. But then he reconstructed a whole new series of scenarios just for the Fantasy Fellowship. And I thought the way that he put it together was actually really cool. So I do applaud that. I was like, oh, that was actually pretty neat. I like that.
Can you, and pardon me, because I've had the electronic version of these rules for about a half an hour before starting this podcast, but can you actually use the Fantasy Fellowship at a tournament? Or is this just okay? That would be fun.
That would be wow. That
sounds like a good tournament to run, though, right?
Yeah, that would be actually pretty. Well, so if you did it, you would have to, because you can, like, for a lot of the characters, you can kind of pick anyone, and so your points are going to be all over the place. And
right. Well, but you're capped at 750 points total.
Oh, are you? Yeah. Okay. So, I haven't read through it all. So
the total cost of your fellowship may not exceed 750 points. So it kind of matches the original fellowship.
We should run Fantasy Fellowship tournaments.
We should. Yeah, you make it a good. What you do is you make it a good evil tournament. So you bring an evil 750 point army, and then you bring a Fantasy Fellowship, and then you alternate between playing your Fantasy Fellowship and then the Op 4, and then your Fantasy Fellowship, and then.
How cool would it be if Jay made scenarios just for Fantasy Fellowship tournaments? I think that.
Well, Devin, if there's ever a Nova ever again, then maybe that's something we should talk about.
You know what? This seems like a good idea for all of you on the podcast who actually go to Nova, who are listening to this channel. Let me know if you want a Fantasy Fellowship tournament. I actually think I might do that. That sounds really cool. Might be a good replacement for Deadliest Heroes. So,
there you go.
I think that's great.
All right, so we've discussed the most important part of the book.
Well, Matt, you're actually an avid person in Nova. Would that appeal to you?
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
yeah, I definitely bring that.
I mean, who doesn't want to try to get a kill with one of the hobbits? I mean, that's always fun when you get like that one random kill with like Merry or Pippin.
Yeah,
or Rosie.
There's plenty of hobbits to work with too, no? Because I think you can swap Merry and Pippin for like any hobbit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and one of the cool things I was reading, and again, I have not had this book for very long, is that you can actually, I believe, choose Smeagol as your Ringbearer.
Yes, you can.
Really kind of funny. Imagine Smeagol getting the Mithril shirt and Sting.
I mean, I might even like do the rounds like that, where you actually like acquire stuff just like the Fellowship. Yeah. Like, I don't know, I'd have to figure it out, but I don't think you'd want to use like the normal scenarios. I think you definitely want like custom scenarios for these guys to make it more like thematic and interesting.
Oh, absolutely.
But, I mean, you could kind of use a subset of the normal scenarios, because obviously you don't want the ones that are going to be dominated by horde armies and things like that. But you could probably kind of cull some scenarios out of there that'd be fun, or you could make up some that would be fun. That would be good too.
I mean, wow, all right, that might be another podcast going into that in detail.
The Fantasy Fellowship tournament.
I think that I'm definitely interested in thinking about that. So that's how this came to be, if anyone wondered how it started.
Well, if you don't run it, I might. So
actually, I think you should run it in another tournament. We'll test out the concepts, see if it's fun or if it's all in one.
Always fun to do. Be the first to try something, right?
Okay. Let's get on to the first Legendary Legion, which is the Breaking of the Fellowship. So I'll move over to Devin for that. So what was the Breaking of the Fellowship Legion?
All right. So just so I think everyone who knows who's following this podcast today, we're going to be talking about the 6 Legendary Legions plus the 2 profiles. So we're going to be focusing on that. We're not going to be focusing on any of the scenarios or even the Fantasy Fellowship, just strictly that and looking at it from how we think this impacts like a lot of tournament competitive play. So what I'm going to do for anyone who doesn't have the book is I'm going to go ahead and read through this just real quick, say some big points. So it's going to, the Breaking the Fellowship is unique in the fact that it's a 600-point Legion, so you can't go any higher than that. So you definitely reach great heights in my book if you bring it to an 800-point tournament. So it's Aragorn. It's the Fellowship, all right. So it's pretty much all the Fellowship members except a couple things. Everyone pretty much is stripped of all their options. Boromir can take a shield, which I think is interesting considering at the breaking of the Fellowship he didn't have his shield, and it's actually one of the reasons he died. So I find it interesting that Jay included the option for a shield. That might be for competitive purposes, but I'm not really sure. Or maybe to make it round out to a flat 600 points, which is probably more likely. Then Frodo comes with the Mithril Coat and Sting. By default, you can't take it off. Otherwise, everyone is their bear form, just with no options. So
bear form.
Yep, just no
list of Bjornings.
Yeah, list of Bjornings.
Speaking of someone to put in your Fantasy Fellowship,
there you go.
I just want to see the Peregrine Took bear form model.
Would still be a fool.
So they get a bunch of.
It's like Winnie the Pooh.
So this Fellowship does get a bunch of additional rules here. And it says they must always include Aragorn, who is always the army's leader. They always are deployed as a single warband, with Aragorn being the warband captain. And all models in the Force gain an elven cloak for free. So that's a little bit of a unique thing, which honestly, with a small warband like this, is actually useful. You probably will be using Woodlands a little bit. Maybe. I mean, the whole Fellowship slows down to a crawl with 2-inch hobbits, but, you know, potentially, depending on what you're in, I guess. They have the Gifts of Galadriel. So this is going to be the longest part of this, which is Frodo has the Light of Eärendil, which is each turn Frodo may use a single free will point to attempt to cast the Blinding Light magical power. This is cast on a 3-up and cannot be channeled. Frodo cannot use this if he is wearing the ring. So just to note on this, I'm not really sure if you can use other will points in order to increase your chances of casting a spell. What do you guys think? Is that...
I read this, and I think they were intending him not to be able to do that, because that thought crossed my mind. And I mean, it says specifically, he may use a single free will point to attempt to cast.
And I
doesn't say he can use his own will to do it. So I think it's basically he gets Blinding Light on a 3-up.
Yeah. So, I mean, ultimately here, it looks like they intentionally wanted this to be a little finicky. So it's not like a very reliable Blinding Light, but it does replace the fact that Gandalf is gone here. So then you have Sam with an Elven Rope. Sam always counts as rolling a 6 for any climb, jump, and leap test that he has to make. So this rule is interesting because from a competitive standpoint, I'm not sure really 100% where it'll come into play. I imagine there's going to be a situation where normally you wouldn't have leapt over something, but I thought it would have been interesting because I think the Elven Rope in the books actually like burns Gollum, doesn't it? I forgot. Doesn't it do something like that?
Well, it annoys Gollum.
It annoys him.
It doesn't die of it.
Yeah. So, but hey, it's an interesting little rule he gets. Merry and Pippin have the Daggers Noldorin. They can re-roll any failed to wound rolls in combat. I guess that combined with the fact that they can use Boromir's Might if you ever do that. Now it become more useful. Aragorn has the Elven Dagger, which means he gains the Uruk-hai Bane special rule. When he's using this dagger, I'm assuming, is when that comes into effect. You'll probably always be using this dagger because he doesn't have Anduril in this list. So therefore, this is your Elven Blade. How often Uruk-hai Bane will come into play is pretty rare, considering it's actually not the +1 to wound variant. It's the D3 wounds. You cause D3 wounds every time you wound, so it can't be used on normal infantry. Legolas has the Bow of the Galadrim, which allows him, when he's within 3 inches of a friendly model, he can reroll failed to hit rolls when shooting. I think the balance of putting it within 3 inches of a friendly model makes it where Legolas can't sit back as the Fellowship moves forward. So I thought that was great.
Well, he just sits back with a random hobbit.
Yeah, he does sit back with a random Maurya. But see, it still looks like he's guarding one of the hobbits. Like, right. I see the thematic intention there. So, because you're right, everyone's going to take one of Maurya or Pippin, who's not going to do anything anyway, and do that. But,
I just wonder what the logic behind it is. Like the other guy's acting as the spotter.
There's no logic.
One of them has a compass that they're looking
through. That's right.
Compass, they have binoculars that they're looking through.
Yeah. Oh my God! I just want to model him like sitting on Legolas's shoulder with a looking glass.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a
take the shot. Take the shot.
If you go about 4 degrees west and 2 degrees north.
So Boromir has Gimli. Gimli can re-roll all dice in a dual roll. You can only use this 3 times a game. This is because he has 3 pieces of Galadriel's hair. I thought this was pretty thematic, and I think that's actually a pretty good rule, to be honest. There's a lot of times you botch a roll and you really need to re-roll the whole thing. Boromir, woodland creature. He gains that because he has a golden belt. I don't remember the golden belt in the book. I don't know what it did, so maybe that's fitting.
Nobody does. Nobody remembers what Boromir got. And,
yeah.
and that will remain true for this list as well.
Yeah, I think no one will remember it here.
Boromir just got some bling. That's really all it was, right?
People will walk through the woods and they'll still move him half speed and be like, I don't remember what his kid did.
Which I don't know how a shiny golden belt makes you stealthier in woods, but, magic.
Smash cut to Galadriel and Celeborn going, oh, wait a minute, there's another one in this fellowship. What are we going to give that guy? Well, we got this belt that we've never used.
Galadriel saw the future and knew he was going to die anyway. They were like, just give him the belt. Like,
this guy's totally going to take the ring. Let's give him a belt that makes him easier to see for Uruk-hai.
So then you have the Blessing of the Galadriel. So once again, there's a lot of special rules in this Legion, but the Blessing of the Galadriel friendly models always count as having the Fortify Spirit magical power cast upon them. This is always in effect, even if their will has been reduced to 0. This is probably the most potent special rule in here, and obviously eliminates the shutdown. Well, not eliminates, but highly reduce the shutdown from enemy magic, which in this Legion is going to be definitely a thing.
Yeah, this makes Boromir playable.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, Aragorn and Gimli not being targets of spells as well is like awesome. So I think they have 2 more special rules. So another one is the Bond of Fellowship. Models from this legendary Legion count as being in a range of a banner if there's another friendly model in 3 inches. So standard banner rules, but everyone's got it. And I think that's an awesome addition to this. And then you have My Sword, which is the rule they always had, which is essentially as long as Frodo is alive and on the table, or escapes in scenarios where that applies, which is a crucial addition. All models from this legendary Legion gain the Fearless special rule, and they will never count as broken while he's on the table, which is also a huge rule. So, yeah, I mean, anyone have any comments on this Legion?
I'm looking to try this Legion. This looks like a lot of fun.
In an 800-point tournament?
I actually I love this Legion. I think it's narratively really cool, and I think it's got a lot of neat tricks that can kind of push your skill level. I plan to bring it to a 400-point tournament and just
there you go.
Yeah, that is, well, I mean, that is one of the interesting things about this is how do you scale this down, right, to lower point lists? Like,
I think it's easy.
What do you do to make it like a 500-point list?
Legolas and Gimli are flat, and Boromir are flat 100 points.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, I think it's very easy to
but the
scale
question is, do you drop one of them, or do you drop, say, Frodo, Merry, and Peregrine?
Oh, you can drop Frodo.
Yeah, he's not mandatory in this Legion. Only Aragorn is
mandatory.
I mean, you lose the bonus rule.
Yeah, you do, which is actually a pretty big rule, to be honest.
You also lose Fearless if it matters to you.
Yeah, no, actually, that's the one I was thinking of. Like not the Fearless. Yes, is important in the sense that maybe the Hobbits or whatever, if you want to tag something. But realistically, I think it's the never being considered broken rule that.
Right.
is probably crucial.
But, the question is, are Frodo, Merry, and Pippin worth Boromir?
Okay. Yeah.
Or are Frodo, Merry, and Pippin worth Gimli or Legolas?
Frodo is 80. Yeah, you're right. Okay. Yeah. Actually. Yeah. I guess you drop all the hobbits.
Well, it's not clear what the answer to that question is. I mean, especially if Rangers of Ithilien are going to be wandering around.
I mean, if you took Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, Boromir with Shield, and Sam, that's 500 points.
Yeah.
So I mean, maybe you do that at 500, but at 400, it becomes a little bit more awkward. And then also at let's say 450. Well, you can't just do Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, and Boromir because you'll be either 5 or 10 points over with Boromir.
I think. All right. So from an American perspective, I know in the UK 600 points are much more common, and I think they go lower. America, I rarely see a tournament go lower than 600. I think 600 is like the minimum I've ever seen it. So,
yeah, but I mean, even just for like a friendly game, we're going to get together tomorrow night. We're going to play 500 points. It's an interesting thought experiment to see how you engineer this to a smaller points limit.
I do think probably the smartest option is just to eliminate the hobbits, which can be targeted for breaking. Like to break your legion. And I get it, Frodo helps prevent you from breaking, but I think it's still the smartest option and to just eliminate them if you were to go down to 500 and just keep all the big hitters.
Yeah, though on the other hand, with Frodo and Sam in there, you get the ring effect and free heroic combats for all your hitters.
Well, so the ring, actually, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, the one ring is huge.
So like having an Aragorn with a Ringbearer in a fight and then Sam to call a combat for him is nothing, right?
Yep.
I mean, I can't believe I'm saying this because he's clearly my character in the movies and game. I might just drop Boromir.
Yeah, I think Boromir is the one that goes. If you have to pick one of the 4 heavy hitters, Boromir is the one that goes first.
Yeah.
Really, not Gimli?
Yeah, not now that he has the 3 reroll everythings. No, it's not Gimli.
I mean, yeah,
he's also one of your few sources of bonuses to wound. So,
oh, yeah, true.
And even
he's defense 8.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so he's survival. Yeah.
I will say that the fortify spirit on everyone is probably the most massive role, like you said, in the Legion. So Boromir becomes a hell of a lot more viable. But even then, I think the other ones also get the fortify spirit, and they're just better at 500.
Yeah. I mean, Gimli's big problem was, at least for me, is every once in a while he'd go in and he'd just fluff, and because he's only got the 2 wounds, he's got 2 wounds, 2 fate. Is that right? I know he's got 2 wounds. I can't remember if he's got 2 fate or 3 fate.
Yes, I think he has 2 wounds, 2 fate. Yep. Yeah,
and then he'd go down. But now that you can kind of re-roll all his dice 3 times, that really kind of solves that. I mean, it's really hard for you to botch with him now.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I mean, I think ultimately, if you're going into a competitive, like this is definitely a theme list. This is like not what you go to try to win Articon. So reasonably, I think.
I was planning to go and win Articon with this.
You know what, Matt? Knowing your list you brought to Articon, I don't doubt that. You would win some American tournaments with this and be like, you know what? Maybe.
It could work. No, really, guys, it could work.
Okay. We're going to move on to the next Legion, which is the Rangers of Ithilien. So I'm going to move that over to Rob.
Okay, so the Rangers of Ithilien. This is a legion that most of you should already know because it is essentially broadly a reprint from the Gondor at War. So just to refresh you, you can take Faramir, Madril, Damrod, Frodo, Samwise, and Smeagol, and then Captains of Minas Tirith, Asciliath Veterans, Warriors of Minas Tirith, and Rangers of Gondor, with all of the associated gear. Rangers gain woodland creature, and they don't count for bow limit within Ranger warbands with some of the Ranger heroes. And then Frodo, Sam, and Smeagol can be deployed together or in Faramir's warband. Now, the big change is that this version of the Legion in this book actually added 2 new profiles, which are also Ranger heroes, and therefore do also count for the no bow limit for Rangers if they are leading them. So really, there's not a lot to talk about the Legion itself because everybody's talked about this to death, but I will go over the new profiles because I think they do add something completely new. So we have first Anborn, Ranger of Ithilien. He is a pretty standard minor hero stat line. So fight 4, defense 5, 1 attack, 1 wound, 1/1/1. He comes with an armor, sword, and bow, and heroic accuracy, like most shooty characters do. He has Woodland Creature, and his new special rule is Lethal Aim, which is each turn he can spend a single point of might without reducing his store to modify either to hit roll, a in the way roll, or a to wound roll when shooting with his bow. So that's a lot like that one hunter character. What's his name? Narzuk, I think.
Narzuk.
Yeah. So that's a very interesting. He is 35 points. So a cheaper hero with some cool special rules. And then the second character is Mablung, who finally makes it into the game. He was a huge part of the book. Didn't appear in the movie. He was essentially replaced in some ways by Madril in the movie. And he is also a minor hero, also 35 points, also has the standard minor hero stat line, fight 4, strength 4, d5, 1 attack, 1 wound, 1/1/1, armor, sword, and bow, heroic accuracy, and woodland creature. And his special rule is also very interesting. It's called Bird Calls. And it means that Mablung and any rangers of Gondor within 6 inches of him, including the heroes Faramir, Madril, Damrod, and Anborn, gain the Stalk Unseen special rule. So essentially he gives them elven cloaks. And additionally, enemy models targeted by a shooting attack from Mablung or any rangers of Gondor within 6 inches of him, including Faramir, Madril, Damrod, and Anborn, do not benefit from Stalk Unseen. So he gives you an elven cloak and denies it to your opponent, which is actually kind of a neat little trick.
So before we go on, question on how that rule works, because I've been kind of trying to puzzle this out. I'm not sure I've got it yet. So in order to, I get how he gives the Stalk Unseen rule to everybody within 6 inches. That's clear. So as far as negating other people's Stalk Unseen rule, does it mean, as I understand it, it means you have to have somebody in his warband within 6 inches, or I'm sorry, somebody within 6 inches of him, within 6 inches of the target with Stalk Unseen so that they can see it.
No.
Once they can see it, everybody else can see it.
Not within 6 inches of the target. Can you reread that, Rob?
Yeah, so specifically, it's additionally, enemy models targeted by a shooting attack from Mablung or any rangers of Gondor within 6 inches of him do not benefit from the Stalk Unseen special roll for the duration of that shooting attack. So basically, anyone with Mablung and any ranger within 6 inches of Mablung negates Stalk Unseen without themselves having to be within 6 inches of the target or anything like that.
All right, so that may have been the intent. That's not what they wrote, right?
Well, they said enemy models targeted.
That are targeted, but you can't target somebody unless you can see it. So somebody has to see it.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, which actually tracks with Jay's explanation on the Warhammer community site of how this rule is supposed to work, which is like somebody sees the guy and then he does the bird call to say he's over, tweet, he's over there. And then everybody else can see him and target him.
So I see what you're saying from a wording perspective. You're correct. And so, but let's assume you're right. Let's assume that's the way that it was intended. Are you arguing that the way this rule is supposed to work is you have one of your own models within 6 inches of them? And
so you have a guy who's within 6 inches of Marlung.
Yeah.
And he gets line of sight on a Stalk Unseen guy because he gets within 6 inches. At that point, that Stalk Unseen guy is negated for everybody else within 6 inches of.
So that means the rule would only work within like this tiny 8-inch.
You send out your scouts, you find the guy, and once the scout finds the guy, everybody else can see.
So the way I see this is I don't dispute that from a rules as written perspective, you could reach that conclusion. I think the intention is that it's just a bubble of 6 to negate. And the reason I think that is because it's kind of like the Maurya army bonus, where technically it doesn't ever work because it keys off of trapped, but you only check for trapped after a fight has already happened. So they would actually get their bonus. So I think it's one of those where they meant to work it a very different way than it actually works in game, right? Or
I mean, and by the way, I thought that's what they intended to until I heard Jay explain it on Warhammer Community. And the way he explained it, I was like, oh, wait a minute. Maybe they did actually mean what they said.
This is also going to be similar to and in fact, this might still be in effect in the current edition of the rules. When you have a one-on-one fight, you back directly away. Like, but everyone backs in any direction because you only actually do that in multiple man fights. But like in 1v1, you must back directly away. But literally,
I thought they changed that.
I think they changed it, but I know in the old edition that was the case, and no one played it that way. We all played it by the intention. This is an interesting problem that Lord of the Rings has kind of always had. Not that it's a good thing, by the way, but yeah, it seems like I think the way we're saying it, me and Rob, is the way they wanted it to play. But you're 100% correct, Matt. It doesn't work that way if you analyze it by the rules, which makes it very frustrating because it's like, okay, when do you go by the spirit of intention and when do you go by rules as written? And
this is the whole using Shadowfax's will to cast spells thing.
Yeah.
Where if you actually read the rule about what a model is supposed to be, you can use his will to do that. But but anyway, I mean, you guys may be right, but
well, certainly it's good to bring up because it should be clarified in a.
It probably needs to be FAQ.
Right? Yeah. Speaking of which, did they ever clarify the Maurya bonus in an FAQ?
No, they never bothered. Like they're just like everyone will just know how it works. Technically, you should never get your Maurya bonus. And I'll argue that at Warhammer World one day. I'm like, well, I'm not trapped. I haven't lost a fight yet.
Yeah, absolutely. I will do that if
how much
is on the line.
No. Adam Troke will walk over and be like, really, Devin?
Yeah, he might actually hit you.
So, I mean, going off the Legion itself, I mean, I think this has been talked about. We all know the problems of this Legion. This is one of those Legions that clearly the rules writers felt it must exist because there's a cry for it. There's like, hey, I want this Legion to exist. And this is almost one of those Legions where, like, you have to dramatically alter the way the game plays at range or, like, the way bows work or the way they work or something in a make this fun to play. Because it's not fun to play according to most of the community.
And then, you know, having heard the response from the community to this list, they decided, you know what this list needs? More Rangers. So let's give them 2 more heroes to get 12 more Rangers into this list. Yeah,
exactly. So for anybody who hasn't done the math, with the addition of the 2 minor heroes, you can now have 45 models ignoring bow limit in your army.
Which is depressing.
Here's the thing, like, I love this Legion thematically. I love the Rangers of Gondor. I think that any army that forces you to take Faramir, who is otherwise useless, is cool. But yeah, I think that especially at lower points, this is going to be a fairly negative experience for some armies that aren't prepared to handle it. I also feel really bad for Damrod because he's like the oldest profile and he's been completely replaced in any functional use in the army, right? But
yeah. I mean, I have to say, Anborn and Mablung are definitely. This was kind of a tone-deaf move by Games Workshop here.
Yeah. This is. I don't know what the internal discussion was, but this is very clearly like them trying to satisfy a desire of the audience without really making the changes needed. Like this is one where like you have to do something super creative, like, I don't know, ambush half the Legion so that way, you know, you can go up to them and, you know, only be shot by half the Legion's shots.
And or make the bow limit 50% rather than 100%.
Yeah, or 50%. Like well, no, they couldn't do that because everyone's armed with a bow, and they've always said if it's armed with a bow. Well, so you're saying that you should force the requirement of the Azagiliath veterans in the other half of the Legion.
I mean, I'm not saying that because that would really suck, but I'm saying that's one way to balance the shooting.
Yeah,
I mean, there's another way to do it too, and you could make Frodo, Sam, and Smeagol mandatory in this Legion.
Agreed.
And I imagine, same to the point, they wanted to allow you to play this Legion as it was throughout time, which is kind of a weird argument because I think this is supposed to represent very specifically the time where Frodo and Sam, which by the arguments of a legion, it's supposed to be like a scene in time, right? Like a snapshot in history. So therefore, you're right. Like Frodo's.
Well, technically, I think the Rangers of Ithilien were operating before Frodo, Sam, and Smeagol got there. So they made it kind of like you could do when they were just operating in the area fighting the Haradrim, or when they finally encountered the three travelers. But I agree that for balance purposes, making them mandatory would have been better.
Or make the whole legion forced to always operate with Maelstrom of Battle rules at all times.
Sure, I think that would be great.
Regardless of scenario, they are always Maelstrom of Battle.
Now, one question I would ask.
That would be really great if you were playing these guys and say reconnoiter.
Yeah.
Or seize the camp.
Huzzah!
I'm already here.
One thing I would ask you guys, because I mean, we could talk about the Rangers of Ithilien forever and come to the same conclusions. How about these two new characters in a non-Rangers of Ithilien army? Like, what use would you see for them in just the Gondor army? Because they can obviously just be taken as Gondor models.
Yeah, that's a good question.
I think Anborn's a good guy to take in a Gondor list.
The one who gets +1 to shooting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To like pick off horses and stuff, maybe.
Oh, 100%.
Yep.
Yeah. And throw him in with a half dozen Rangers, and he's like your shooting force.
I think Mablung is not going to see as much play. Stalk and Scene has been relegated now that you can't use models to hide behind. The usefulness of it, like between him and all the other Gondor heroes you can pick for similar point costs, he's going to lose out most of the time, I think.
So
he's
Stalk
definitely the
Unseen.
last guy you take.
Yeah, definitely. Stalk Unseen is one of those rules that either matters completely none at all, or is the most important rule in the game. I remember at one of the Fords tournaments, actually, I ran into a Rangers of Mirkwood army, and the board was literally like a Normandy-style hedgerow board. For a board game. I was like, I can't see anything the whole game.
So you're right. In tournaments where terrain is ridiculous.
Yeah, I was like, what is this? Like, I'm literally like assaulting Normandy. This is Market Garden.
I don't mean to insult and say ridiculous. I shouldn't say that. Where terrain is plethora, like a plethora of it, because there are some tournaments. Actually, Matt's tournament, Shadow in the East.
Yeah, there's lots of terrain.
There's lots of terrain. You just know when you go there, you're going to play. Yeah. So in that case, Mablung now becomes a pick. Like he actually is like.
But all that said, I agree with you that he's still like the last on my list, right? I would take all the other ones because the potential that one game you might run into Stalk Unseen versus knowing that Anborn is useful in every game, you always take him first.
The other advantage to him is as an objective holder. Mm-hmm. Like you have him and his, he's the guy that can sit back in a terrain piece on an objective and just kind of shoot with impunity from that terrain piece for a while from the backfield.
Yeah.
I think I still take him last, but that's heavy use.
I have a hard time justifying him over even like just spending the extra 20 points for like Madrill and someone who's doing something like useful only in certain scenarios still, but like now.
Well, I mean, in this list, Faramir is a given, Madrill is a given. Then you're like, all right, so which of these three other guys do I take? And you probably take Anborn next. Yeah. And then I don't know. I guess I would debate whether to take.
I think I take Damrod.
Mablung or Dam.
I think basically 10 points less.
Maybe. Yeah, but I mean that's one more Ranger, right?
Yeah.
And maybe it's worth having
10 spears.
One less Ranger to have a guy with an elven cloak, and then 6 other guys near him with an elven cloak.
Though honestly, at that point, I might also just start considering just the regular captain of Middle Earth on a horse with a lance to have some cavalry in there. And you still get Rangers in that warband. It's just only a third of it, right? So.
Yeah. If Mablung did something like, which I love his rule, I think it's great, but like if he allowed in his warband, you can take 100% Rangers or something, which I don't know why that would be thematic, but if you could have something like that, maybe like all the Rangers in his warband didn't count, which he only leads 6, so it's not like crazy. But then I can see more use for him. But I mean, the Bird Calls rule, though, I mean, we're just talking about it from competitive aspects. So, anyone listening to this, don't confuse it as we don't like the rule. I actually think all of us here think the rule is
100%. Like I said, thematically speaking and narratively speaking, I love the 2 new profiles, and I love as a Gondor person to finally have these personalities in the game, right? Yeah. That they were huge in the books. So,
So.
All right, we'll move on to the next one, which is Lurtz's Scouts. So I'll move over to Matt for that one.
All right, so Lurtz's Scouts. So this list represents the scouts that attacked Amenhen, and this is the other side to the Breaking of the Fellowship Legendary Legion. So in this, you get Lurtz with shield, you get Ugluk, you get Maher, who famously in the book was not there, but is there in the list. Uruk-hai scout captains with all their bells and whistles you can get for them, an Uruk-hai drummer, and then Uruk-hai scouts are your soul troops, and you can get one with a banner, and then they have their various war gear options. There appears to be a misprint under shield. It says shield point. I assume that's 1 point. So it's a standard loadout for the Uruk-hai scouts. So the additional rules, Lurtz has to be the leader. No big surprise there. And then the special rules, they have Relentless March, which is, I believe, the same rule that's in the Ugluk scout list. If your army includes Maher, who shouldn't be there, then any Uruk-hai scouts in your force may be upgraded to Maher's Marauders rather than just the ones in Maher's Warband. Upgrade is free rather than cost of 1 point per model, so it's the free upgrade to 8 inches move. In additionally, Lurtz, Ugluk, Uruk-hai scout captains, and Uruk-hai drummers increase their movement value to 8 inches. So as long as you take Maher, which you're always going to do in this list, everything you have in the list starts to move 8 inches. And then you can take a drummer and stack an additional 3 inches of move on that. Additionally, you also get the Will and Creature special rule. Second special rule, a worthy foe. Lurtz may declare a heroic challenge against any hero model, regardless of heroic tier. The rule everyone's been waiting for. Additionally, if Lurtz declares a heroic challenge and the targeted hero declines, and Lurtz regains the might point spent during the declaring of the heroic challenge. No doubt there will be a lot of discussion about this special rule, but let me go to the next one, which is shield throw. Once per game, Lurtz can choose to throw his shield as a throwing weapon. This is strength 4, and any man size or smaller model hit by the shield is automatically knocked prone. Once Lurtz has thrown his shield, he no longer carries it and cannot use it for the remainder of the battle. Note, even though he no longer has his shield, Lurtz's defense will not be reduced because he also has the bow. So his shield doesn't count for anything except having the ability to shield. Yeah. So this is the list that the Ugluk Scouts list should have been, because it has Lurtz, another Killy hero, and it is all scouts. I mean, we all know the problem with the Ugluk Scouts.
They get slowed down by the orcs.
Yes, you have the scouts that move 11 inches and then the orcs that move 6 inches. So the way the game usually plays out is half of your army shows up early on in the battle, gets slaughtered by the entirety of the other guy's army, and then the other half of your army shows up 2 to 3 turns later and then gets slaughtered by the army that's left behind. And this list does not have that. The entire list can move 11 inches and get where you need it to be.
But obviously with the other lists, it had to be thematic to the movies, and they had to work. So yeah. I actually think this is what Maher Scouts wanted to be in some various ways. Maher Scouts, we're not going to go into too much of that, but basically have the animosity rule, right? And you could just keep on pace with the orcs and march the Uruk-hai around once you get there. But regardless of that, this is actually a fast legion that, I don't want to... Yeah, 11 inches is, obviously faster than cavalry, which doesn't need to be said, but I imagine you can hit a flank just like cavalry do and try to, get a lot of combats in before the other half of your opponent's army even has a chance to react. I think I agree also with your assessment. Maher shouldn't be here. I don't think he's actually necessary in the list. Does he have heroic strike?
Oh no, he's necessary in the list because you don't get Relentless March without it.
Yeah, but it's a legion. Just say just take that line.
Call him man here or something like that.
No, what I mean is, but it's just you don't. Homer. It's a legion. You just rewrite the rule. Just say, hey, this legion gets this. You don't need it. It's just a legion. Just make your own stuff up now.
Yeah, but they didn't, so he has to be here.
Yeah, he has to be here now. So now you have to bring Maher. But does he have?
So this is the alternate history version of the list in which Maher was not late.
Yeah, this is the snapshot in history of an alternate history.
Yeah.
But from a competitive standpoint, do I like the Legion? I haven't mathed it out as far as how many Uruk-hai I can get. I think the addition of Maher and Ugluk are important mostly because of the heroics they bring. I believe Ugluk is your only other character with Strike. Am I right on that?
Yes.
I can look it up, but I believe you're right.
Yeah, Maher does not have it.
Maher does not have it.
Okay,
Maher has 3 attacks, but no strike, I believe.
Which the 3 attacks will be useful, but realistically, the reason you're bringing Maher is to get the bonus. Because if you don't bring him, all you're getting is Lurtz's worthy foe rule, which I will go ahead and talk about now.
Maher also does bring another source of march, which can stack with the drum for 14 moving.
Do you do that though? Do you march to go to 14 inches, or you?
I might actually entertain doing that
on turn 1 to close. You may do that.
Yeah,
because the drum costs you nothing, and what are you using Maher's might on besides moves and marches? So
Lurtz's rule that allows him to show up anywhere he wants on Maelstrom of Battle. That's in his profile, right? So that comes with him into the list. All right. Yeah, and that's another big add for this.
Oh yeah,
is the ability to have 8-inch guys in Maelstrom of Battle to show up wherever you want them to.
Yeah.
He also famously has the best heroic in the game, heroic actions, which for one might let you do all of them at once.
All the heroic actions. To speak on the competitive play of it, I mean, you have a Fight for Legion that can't support itself. It's weird. I mean, to theorize this, I think that you definitely have to hit only one portion of your opponent's army. Like if you go head to head with them and just literally use your 14-inch movement just to close the gap and then just start swinging at them, like I think you'll just die. Mm-hmm. I think you'll fall apart fast because I mean you have no spear supports. A banner is probably going to be essential in this list.
I think you need more than one banner, honestly, to cover.
Yeah. Actually, that's a good argument. Like you would need probably more than one banner.
Well, and one thing that I know a lot of people have done before, but is a good idea, is to use the Uruks carrying Merry and Pippin if you have them as banners, right? So you can spread out through your list. But that's actually pretty neat. I like that idea. So I think that Uruk-hai bows. Do you bring them?
That's exactly what I was just about to ask. Yeah.
Yes, I do.
I mean, I think especially since you can have them moving 6.5 inches and still shooting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And
wow.
Yeah. 3, right?
That's a good point. With the march, how much can you shoot with if you? Oh well,
if you march, you can move 7. If you don't march, you can go 5.5 because that'll be 11 inches.
Yeah.
Oh right. Yeah, I'm doing my math wrong. Yeah, 5.5 inches and still.
So you can almost move full distance and still shoot.
Yeah, I mean, but moving 7 inches and shooting strength 3 bows at full is still pretty fun, right?
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Uruk-hai bows are only 18 inches, correct?
They're only 18 inches, but you're going to be moving 5.5 inches forward to shoot them. So
they are strength 3, correct?
They are strength 3.
Yeah.
So I think they're.
And they're shoot 4, so you're hitting on 5s if you're moving. So
you can't abuse it too much, but what you can definitely abuse the move and shoot shenanigans, like to move back, shoot, move back, shoot. If your opponent does not have any bows and can't outshoot you, and they're moving towards you, oh man, you could play that game for a while. That'd be pretty boring for your opponent. You could do
well, and you can also use it to shoot into combats to try and in the way
that's true.
You can also just move forward, shoot, move forward, shoot, move forward, shoot.
So then I guess we're all in agreement. 33% bows. You definitely probably want that.
Yeah,
I think so.
Should we talk about the elephant in the room?
Yeah, let's go ahead.
Can we address shield throw real quick?
Oh, sure. That's not the elephant.
Well,
go ahead.
It's not the elephant, but shield throw is the most powerful throwing weapon in the game now. Go ahead.
I think it's actually really cool that you can use this to dehorse heroes, right? Because it
says no, you can't. No. Man-sized. You cannot use it to dehorse.
Somewhere I know
they rule that you can't use
man-sized model in there.
Yeah, no, a man on a horse is not a man-sized model. I'm pretty sure that's been determined at some point.
Yeah, I think it's actually in the rule book. It defines what it is, and it actually does. It's not cavalry. I'm pretty sure.
Never mind. Then it's just fun. Go on.
Yeah, it's just a fun rule.
You can knock someone over if it happens. Like that is a pretty big.
I don't think anyone's saying it's bad. Like, how often are you really shielding with alerts anyway? Mm-hmm. I think it's a great rule. I think it's thematic and it's useful. It's just it's a thing that's.
Well, it only has to hit to knock prone. It doesn't have to wound, so you could use it. Is it a thrown weapon? It is. So you can use it as part of a charge against a hero, right?
Yeah. You can't beat on throw it on the way in.
So maybe what you do is you throw it in, let's say against a big hero. You knock, let's say, your Aragorn down. and then maybe you call a heroic combat with Ugluk. You get Ugluk in on that battle. Heroic strike with Lurtz. Then you've got Ugluk and Lurtz trying to kill them all in one go.
Yeah, I mean, the usefulness of it is obvious. I think anyone playing this rule will know exactly how to use it. I don't think there's any gimmicks here or anything to find. I don't think there's anything special about it. It is literally it's a hero killing weapon. I think the only time I would think it's interestingly like variables, like let's say you have, I don't know if you'd ever want to throw this into a combat.
Would you throw it at a banner? Try to kill the banner because it gets knocked.
Not kill the banner, just turn it off, right?
You're turning off the banner.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you have the opportunity to do it, even more important than that, the banner can't be passed while it's on the ground.
That's what I'm saying. You throw it at the banner.
Yeah, so throw it at the banner.
If it's hit, they're automatically knocked prone. Then you do a strength 4 hit to them. So
and they can't pass it. Yeah, actually, that's a great. So this is a great banner killing weapon to prevent it from being passed around. That's a good point. Good shout on that, Tim. I like that. So,
all right. So the elephant in the room. Has Games Workshop succeeded in its quest to convince somebody at some point somewhere to call a heroic challenge?
Oh my God, no! I still don't think so. You know what? Me and Rob called a heroic challenge Articon doubles one time. And we
didn't call it. We got it called on us, and we accepted.
That's right.
We accepted it.
We were like, why not? It's a doubles. We
were having fun. It was Aragorn on Aragorn, and we're like, how bad could it be?
But
why
it was
did we
such
do
a
that?
bad idea. It basically was a reason we lost the game. I feel.
No, we ended up winning the game, but we would have won it better if we hadn't been dumb.
Oh yeah, that's right. So I'm just like, this rule is so. I mean, for anyone who doesn't know why heroic challenge is bad, the ability to turn off heroics and stand fast is great. But usually, if you're accepting this challenge, you're probably going to be in the losing end. In which case, you're just giving the opponent 3 might or D3 might, and then you can't call a heroic strike. So if you shout the heroic challenge, the other person calls a heroic strike, and then they just kill you. I mean, is there any other reasons you guys know of that this thing is just never used? Like, I'm trying to think off the top of my head here.
So I'm wondering when you would use this. And I guess I'm thinking there's 2 situations where you may want to use it. And that one is against a hero that's like, that is going to try and conserve their might for other purposes. But may not kill Lurtz in a single turn. So like if you go in against something like a Balin, right, where he's got 3 might, there aren't a lot of might in that list to begin with. He's probably he's gonna out duel Lurtz anyway, so he's not going to be calling a heroic strike against you. And you're probably not going to take him down in 1 turn anyway. So go in and you call it, and you prevent. You can probably survive a turn against Balin, and then call the strike the next turn, and then Balin loses his ability to call heroic moves afterwards. So I mean that's I think one situation. You might call it against heroes. Against captains, just to see if you can get. I mean, so if you go into a captain that has 2 might left, he's not going to be striking against you anyway. You're going to outstrike him.
Yeah.
There really isn't a downside at that point to calling a heroic challenge, because if he accepts it, you're going to get the might when you kill him. And if he declines it, he can't use the might to call a heroic move and influence any of his buddies to help get him out of his mess.
I guess it also shuts off marches for those kinds of characters. And so
it shuts off marches.
Outfly them.
Which, no, by the time you're in combat, who cares about the march anyway? Well, I guess the end game.
I mean, we're really digging here, Devin.
Or if he's going to do the other thing is if he's going to try and do a disengage and call a heroic move and get the battle line away or whatever.
Yeah.
But there are some circumstances, I guess, where there's really no downside to calling the heroic challenge against the lower tier heroes, so you may as well do it. And it may be that the other guy is in a tactical situation where he feels that he has to accept it, or he may just make a mistake and accept it, in which case you're just feeding more might points to Lurtz.
Well, there's also there's probably some rare synergies with the shield throw where you could go in on a hero, knock them prone, And then they're essentially, as long as you keep winning that fight, you're, constantly beating on a prone hero. Right?
So maybe that is the answer. Actually, I like that kind of synergy there. Because you could even do that now against like the Balin example, or
you could do it against Aragorn or something like that.
Yeah, knock him down.
If you knock him down, then your first turn's free, and then you can call the heroic strike the next turn against him.
Mm-hmm.
Does the heroic challenge penalty when you deny end when Lurtz dies?
Yes.
That's unfortunate, because I was thinking, like, if it didn't end, then Aragorn could get up and be like, yeah, I'll just deny it anyway and just kill Lurtz. I guess, why would he deny it? Yeah, I guess you would do it against a prone model. That would be probably the one scenario. Plus your captain example. Mm-hmm. If you can't kill the captain, let's say it's a dwarf captain, or,
I think that you're right. Like, you can usually use it against captains because there's no downside. And if you're going to use it against a mid-tier or even higher tier named hero, you do it because you set up a synergy with the shield throw to make the opponent make some bad choices, basically.
Yeah.
I'm just going to form one last question and we'll move on. Does it not just make sense to just use it like almost every time you're against a smaller hero, then you're just denying all heroic moves, and then the characters that you stay away from are your Balins and your Aragorns, because then they have to use their might for heroic moves? So then you're forcing the big heroes to use might for moves.
So I think against lower ranked heroes, I think there is seldom basically heroes that don't have heroic strike, I think, and have a fight value of 5 or less. I don't think that there is a downside to calling that free heroic challenge and just kind of seeing what happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which is ironic considering the rule is named a worthy foe.
Yeah. Although I guess it is going to depend on the tactical situation, because you don't want to call it if it's Lurtz and 3 other Uruk-hai against one captain, because if you call the heroic challenge, those 3 other Uruk-hai become irrelevant.
You also don't want to do it in that situation because a combat is just going to be better anyway.
Yeah.
Do anything.
Well, I mean, the reason that you call it is because you want to have him accept, then kill the guy, then get the might point back at the end.
But isn't the might point back D3, so you could theoretically just get nothing?
One. I mean, you never get nothing because D3 is 1.
Well, that's what I mean, like nothing on top of what you started with.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
but I'm
assuming, yeah, I mean, that way you can then go ahead and like spend a bunch of might to kill the guy to make sure he's dead.
Yeah.
I think one interesting disadvantage of heroic challenge, and we did this, was you can actually block off the guy who got challenged. So, like, let's say you accept the challenge and from Lurtz. So Lurtz challenges your character, you accept it, and then you start running him away and then block off with your troops. I think by the wording, Lurtz can't charge your troops. Like,
you
can't. Yeah, so you actually encircle it, and so you make Lurtz irrelevant. Like,
it's the heroic chicken. I can't say I've ever like parsed out that particular rule.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you can do that, because I remember we did that, Rob, in our Articon doubles. We were like blocking off or something like that and making it where the combat couldn't take place. But there's no stipulation, I think, for that scenario. Like, it just says they can only engage with each other. But we made it where they couldn't touch each other. So they just get stuck.
Yeah. It was just a mess, and it should have been avoided altogether.
So basically, you've got like the 2 guys in the bar fight where like everybody's friends are going, are grabbing him. They're like, hold me back.
Yeah, like in our case, it was 2 Aragorns, so it was like, no, I'm the real Aragorn. No, I'm the real Aragorn.
Yeah, I think even if you were like required to make way or whatnot, if you just engage your troops in combat, then now you can't even meet the requirement of getting out of the way. Like, I have to reread it again, but I'm pretty sure you can block it. Comment in the chat below if you.
We probably spent more time in that game like reading and rereading the actual rules of heroic challenge than we did playing the game.
Let's figure out how you can use
the prize and was off the table. But
well, we have now spent, I think, more time discussing this rule than will ever be spent by anyone actually implementing it. So maybe we move on.
Totally fair.
Okay, the next one we're going to move on to is the Depths of Mourya. So I'm going to go over this real quick. So the army composition is the Balrog, as he always is. You have a Maurya Goblin Captain with what he can normally take, a Maurya Shaman, just a Maurya Goblin Shaman. You have a Maurya Black Shield Captain, a Maurya Black Shield Shaman, a Maurya Goblin Drum. You have a Maurya Goblin Warrior with the basic upgrades, Maurya Black Shield, same upgrades, Black Shield Drummer. You have Maurya Goblin Prowlers and a Cave Troll with its options. The additional rule is a Depths of Maurya force must always include the Balrog, who is always the army's leader. So we'll go into, it kind of has two special rules that kind of, one turns off when the other one turns on. So one of them is called Shadow. And what Shadow does is shooting attacks that target the Balrog will only ever hit on a 5 or more. So this is really, really helping the Balrog against things like siege weapons, because it makes it much more difficult for him to die to siege weapons when you have to hit a 5 or more. And the other part of this rule is and flame. So Shadow turns off when and flame turns on, and vice versa. So once per game, at the start of the shoot phase, the Balrog may select a single enemy model within 3 inches of within itself and roll a d6. On a 2+, that model is immediately set ablaze. This is an active ability. After the Balrog has used this ability, it is no longer benefits from the Shadow ability, like we said earlier. So basically, one version, you can make it so no shooting attacks hit on a 5+, mostly for siege weapons, would be my intended purpose, my guess, or any shooting attacks in general, which is good. And then if you turn that off, then once a game, you can, on a 2+, set someone ablaze, which is also very good. Another one of his rule is the Dominion of the Balrog. So friendly goblin models within 6 inches of the Balrog gain a +1 to their fight value. Additionally, this army will never be considered broken so long as the Balrog has 6 or more wounds remaining. Should the Balrog have 5 or fewer wounds remaining, then the army will break as normal. And if he is slain, the army will immediately count as broken. So basically, they gave him kind of a Sauron kind of rule where as long as he has 6 or more wounds, you'll never break. If you get to 5 or below, or 5 to 1, I should say, you break as normal. And then if he dies, you immediately break. So it really makes you have to fight the Balrog to break this army, which is kind of cool. And the drums in the deep. The effects of Maurya Goblin or Maurya Goblin drums are increased from 18 inches to battlefield wide. Additionally, so long as the drum and at least one drummer are alive, then the drum will count as a banner for the purpose of victory points in scenarios that award victory points for having a banner left alive. So basically, this Legion is one of those things where if you are a fan of playing as the Balrog, you are very happy. And if you're not a fan of the Balrog, you are not happy because it gives a lot of benefits to the Balrog and the drums. And I'll be honest with you, if you ever plan on taking a Balrog, I don't see any reason you would never not take this Legion.
This is a highly competitive Legion.
Yes,
like
this is very
highly.
Very
like I mean, this
Legion is bullcrap.
I am one of those people who's a fan of the Balrog, so I'm very happy about this.
Oh God,
I mean, it's no secret I'm not a fan of the profile of the Balrog. I really wish it would just be rewritten entirely. But, and it, for anyone who hasn't heard my rant, it's summed up to just simply a fight 10, defense 10, or whatever defense it is. I think it's like 9, and then it's like 10 wounds, and it just takes forever to take this thing down. And even if you do everything right, you got a 50-50 chance of losing. And now you gotta go after him. Like, there's no ignoring him. Nothing. And you know what? I mean, this is one I would take to like Articon. Like,
absolutely,
this is very powerful Legion on paper, anyway. I haven't mathed it out, like, because you have the Balrog and then you have the drums, which I think you really should take in this Legion, given how they count as a banner, and they're battlefield wide. So
battlefield wide. Yes.
I don't know why you wouldn't take the Black Shield ones now.
Yeah,
like just run them to the back of the field somewhere.
Well, see, actually, I'm going to disagree with that. I think you take the regular drum because you get 2 drummers compared to 1. And then not only that, but you can kind of hide them behind a terrain piece, and you don't have to move them because they're in the back of the battlefield. So, like, it's all about – so if they get a pot shot at the end, well, you could have 2 drummers instead of 1.
I guess I would run them with, like, maybe 2 other Black Shields. My issue is if you take, like, a couple cavalry or whatever, you try to go chase after the drum because chances are wherever the Balrog goes, the army is huddling around him.
So you send a couple cav models. Well, now if you try to run away or re-maneuver from those cav, your banner's now disabled. And that's the only reason. But I think that's what you're saying is still worthy of note. I don't know, Matt, do you have a thought?
I wonder whether, I wonder actually where to deploy this drum and in which warband to put this drum. I think the answer is you put this in the Balrog's warband, because if there's one place where people are not going to go, it's going to be near the Balrog. And I think the advantage to having the Black Shield drum then is you can follow the Balrog around with the drum.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's probably the better way to play it. I've done the whole game of run the banner away, and it doesn't always work. So I think keeping it around the Balrog is a smart option.
Especially for the same points, too. And they have a higher defense as well. That's always a good thing.
But that said, like, there's an argument to be made. A regular drum with some goblins around it sitting in the back somewhere on an objective is also possible. Right.
Because if you move the drum forward, you have a risk of being shot at. And then, unless you bought an additional upgrade for the Black Shield.
Would buy a couple Black Shields to keep this thing going.
Yeah.
Like, I just would do that.
But you can do that with the regular drum, too. I mean, you can just have your regular. I mean, that's someplace to put, like, your goblins with bows is just kind of sitting back around the drum. Yeah. And if he's going to send a force big enough to try and take the drum out in against the drum, then the Balrog just goes, ooh, yummy. And
what's crazy about this force also is, like, the way I think I would play it, and I'm not sure I'm totally convinced on this, but the Balrog now has to be the target. So in order to do anything to this Legion, essentially, because, of course, the drums, but if you take a Black Shield Shaman and shatter the target that could threaten your Balrog, the Gilgalads or the Aragorns and whatnot, hell, maybe I might even take two.
I was going to say, I can take one captain and two shamans.
Yeah, one captain, two shamans. That's literally the build I would do. And I wouldn't even care if I go first or second, because what you do is you create a ring around the Balrog. They do whatever they want, and then the Balrog's like, whip, just grab whatever it wants. And, obviously because of his height, you can see everything perfectly. And so...
The only downside of that is that because you've got a 350-point centerpiece to an army that basically exists to be a horde army in the first place, once you start dropping 50 points a pop into Black Seal Shamans, you're sacrificing 10 goblins every time you do that, and you stop being a horde pretty soon.
Yeah, and especially if you're taking a drum on top of that.
It also depends on points, because at 750 you can still get almost 50 goblins if you have.
I think you take this at 800, and I'll tell you, at 800 points you can get two Black Shield Shamans, a captain, a drum, the Balrog, and I think it's either 46 or 47.
Which is healthy.
Goblins.
So
you have goblins.
Remember, you've only effectively got two might at that point. I mean, I guess you.
I don't think you need it.
I don't think this force needs it.
You do need the might. You need four to six. You need it. I would not want to run this list with less than 6 might to fuel the Balrog, because otherwise, what ends up happening is some idiot charges in against the Balrog in a situation where, because the Balrog's got a huge base, he's not going to get a big heroic combat opportunity, and then that just keeps happening. So you really need marches to get the Balrog where you need it, and you need moves in order to keep him moving. And this army loses a lot of effectiveness when you don't have those little, captain might batteries running around behind the lines to keep the Balrog moving.
Is your argument you wouldn't bring a Maurya Shaman at all?
I don't know. I'd have
not a Maurya Shaman, Black Shield Shaman. Sorry,
a Black Shield Shaman. I'd have to really think about it. I don't think I would bring more than one, because I think once you throw 100 points into that, that's the opportunity cost in both might and goblins is really high.
Now, one model I really want to point out in this army is the Prowlers, because with the Balrogs, I think you take 12 Prowlers in this force, and the reason I say that is because the Balrog affects 6 inches both sides. So that means your Prowlers go up to fight 4 when they're alongside the Balrog. So then you have a fight 4 front line that has throwing weapons at they have the +1, of course, and then you still get the banner effect for the spears behind with the drum. So you still effectively have 2 dice to try to win the fight, but then you also get the +1 with the Prowlers at fight 4.
So I agree with the general premise. I think fight 4 Prowlers get fight 4 into the list. I don't know if I'd put them in the front line because they're really squishy. And they also have Backstabber, don't they? So
yeah, they have Backstabber, yeah.
Into trapped fights where they add the fight and then they're getting like +2 to wound, so you can really mess things up.
So you try to use them as like a flank kind of a thing and then get behind them still within 6 inches kind of a thing.
Just out of curiosity, so they're one of those, on their profile it says they have, I think it's a 2-handed axe or something like that, and then they have throwing daggers. I remember this discussion when it applied to the Grimhammers last time about whether you could use the throwing dagger as an alternative to the 2-handed axe if you wanted to not get the -1 penalty. And I think the answer was that you could, because even if it's a throwing dagger, it is still a dagger and you can still stab somebody with it.
Ooh, I'd want a ruling on that.
So what I remember about this is somebody asked this question and I gave the answer, look, well, actually this may have been different because this was this was back in the days when you looked at the figure to figure out what it was armed with, and they were in the whatever those guys were called. The Grimhammers were kind of festooned with axes, so you couldn't tell, like, is this the throwing axe or is this the non-throwing axe?
Right.
But
they're classified as ranged weapons.
They are.
To my knowledge,
so maybe
you cannot use a
maybe
ranged
that's the answer.
weapon.
You can't use it. I don't know.
Yeah,
well,
I don't
if
think
you can't use it.
But it is also a dagger, right? And I mean, dagger.
Yeah, but it's you could call it a sword if it like as soon as it's classified as a ranged weapon, it doesn't matter. It's a ranged weapon, so it can't be used in melee.
So I guess that's right. It's like a throwing spear, right? You can't use a throwing spear as a spear. So okay.
Yeah.
Either way, though, I mean, you're likely to outnumber, and so you're going to have multiple dice in the fight plus the battlefield wild reroll. So even if you have to use a 2-hander, he's really just there to add the fight 4 and then kill the target, right?
And exactly, and so I do agree with the assessment on the Prowlers. I think
so.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, that's pretty much it. I mean, I guess if you're starting to fill out with Prowlers, you probably don't want to do the Goblin Shaman trick, or maybe, as Matt said, just do one.
Yeah, I think you pick one gimmick or another.
I think you play a couple of games with it, see what feels best, and then see how you go from there. So maybe you try a game with 2 captains and a shaman, or just all the captains, or 2 shamans, and try it out and see how it goes, and then go from there. Because we're only really going to know about this unless we try it out. But I don't know about you guys. I think this is an 800-point force rather than anything lower.
You could swing it for 7.
You could do this lower.
You could go. Lower? You could definitely swing this for 7. The argument really is, could you do it at 6?
That would be interesting. I've wondered about that. I have to run the numbers to see if you could do it at 6.
Yeah. I think so. I definitely think you can go below 8.
One other experience from somebody who has experience playing with the Balrog is I would be wary of surrounding the Balrog with guys that get that -1 on the dual roll, because the classic thing that always seems to happen with the Balrog is somebody charges you with one guy and you're there trying to get the heroic combat, and that one guy shields and he rolls a 6 and the Balrog rolls a 4, 3, 2, 1 and then he stopped. And so I always found if I wanted the Balrog to keep moving, I needed 2 or 3 goblins to jump into that combat to make sure that
activate
the Balrog not just activate the banner, but just give him more dice.
More dice, yeah.
And as soon as you start throwing in guys that get a -1 on the dual roll, you lose that benefit. Because a lot of the fights you're going to be having around the Balrog are going to be the Balrog against one guy that's shielding, and you're trying to get your heroic combat off, so you need to roll the 6. That's why you just want more guys rolling more dice. You don't care whether you're going to kill them or not. You just want the more dice.
Ironically, in that situation, the Shatter Shaman is also helpful to make sure they can't roll a 6, right? Even if you're using a cheeky move against a warrior that you just need to combat off of.
And if you're shattering a cheeky warrior, there's just one warrior. That's pretty bad.
That's a win for the warrior.
Yeah, I'm like, sure.
But I still got my shield.
Yeah.
All right.
In any case,
the flame rule. We should discuss that before we move on, by the way.
Yeah. Okay, discuss the flame rule, and then I'd love to give some general thoughts, because I actually think this Legion's bad for the game. So, go ahead.
Okay. Well, the flame rule, I would just definitely cast it on a mounted model. That's really all I got to say about it. So
yeah,
agree.
Moving on.
Stay in shadow. You stay in shadow. Once you have that, then you move to flame. That's it.
It's obvious how you would use that gimmick. So
yeah, and don't bother using it on somebody that's defense 8 or above.
Which, by the way, how does the Balrog become hard to hit? Like, literally, it's a massive, giant. Like, I get it, a shadow cloud, but I'd be like, shoot at the center of that cloud, I guess.
It's not that big. It's only like twice as big as Gandalf. I mean, just look at the figures. Put them next to each other.
Okay, maybe I've overestimated the size. He's big in my mind. Right? So go ahead, Rob, with your rant.
So I hate this Legion, and I will not be shy about that. I mean, thematically, absolutely, it's a big part of the movie. It should exist, but we've essentially got a Legion that is borderline unbeatable on scenarios, right? Because you are never getting leader points, you're never getting breaking points, you're never getting banner points, and you're still facing a horde of 50 plus models for objective games. So like, what do you do against this Legion? I would say you probably take the Siege of Helm's Deep one with the double ballista that are more accurate and get a bunch of rerolls.
Yeah.
But even then, he's only hit on a 5, and then every tournament is just the Balrog versus 2 ballistas, and that's just awful, right? Like, no one's going to have fun in that environment. So I appreciate the premise of this Legion, but I think it's awful. I hate this Legion.
Hey, this Legion is a good answer to the Rangers of Ithilien list.
It definitely is. I mean,
which is why I was wondering whether I was just wondering whether you could put this together at 600 points, just as like a.
I think to Rob's conversation where he talks about it's bad for the game, I do think this on paper. Keep in mind, obviously we assume Jay has play tested this and his team. We're looking at it on paper. So I do always encourage people to play the Legion, see how it goes in tournament play, and actually experience, but on paper, I do agree with Rob in the fact that it is so much points denial in a horde army. And that's key. Like if this was the Balrog and 3 of his friends, then this would be beatable.
Yeah, if it was a Balrog and 3 cave trolls, okay, right?
Yeah, but it's a horde, which by the way, never take the cave troll.
Yeah, no.
But,
and on top of that, you also have access to the most busted spell in the game in Shatter. So even heroes, to your point, that could theoretically have the juice to take on the Balrog, you just have 2 like gibbering poops goblins destroy their primary armament, and then it's like, okay, game over, right?
Yeah, and you can be real reckless with this Legion. I mean, not too reckless, but you can definitely be reckless, because before, where you would have to be conservative in how you fight, because you could break and lose points for that. Not lose. I mean, I've seen it in Barad-dûr, and that's obviously where this gets compared. Now, just to throw this out there before we move on, is I like Barad-dûr because Sauron is a fight 9, 5 wound, defense 8. Maybe 10. He might be 10, but he's 5 wounds.
6 wounds?
Yeah.
No, he's 5 wounds.
5 wounds. 10. He's 5 wounds, and only you have to get him down to 2 in order to allow him to break. Yeah. That is a much more reasonable expectation. Like a far more reasonable, even if he is defense 10, it's far more reasonable expectation because it's only 5 wounds, and you can heroic strike, and he has to match you sometimes, depending what you're throwing at him, and he's only got 3 might. He's got 6 will, which he's using some of it to cast spells, which means it's going to burn down. This thing has resistant to magic 10 will.
Yeah.
It's absurd. 10. It is an absurd profile.
Well, and that's the problem is that the problem with the Balrog is that even at your best, it's a 50-50. And I feel like this Legion is an extension of that to the whole game, where you could do everything right and still lose just because you can't do anything, right? And I don't think that games where you go into it thinking, I literally have no interaction with this army at all, are fun to play with or against. So,
and even
we got to see it though, for sure.
But I absolutely agree with you, Devin, that, I'm just looking at it on paper. This is theoretical. Everyone go play it and try it out, and then find out that we're right and put it away.
But be careful, because if you complain about it, it might go the route of the Ithilien Legion and get like another Balrog. Something.
Yeah. The dwellers get a buff and they get included.
Free dweller.
Everyone hates this Legion. What should I do? Add more Rangers.
The problem with the Balrog and Balrog-centered lists have always had has been against mobility like Maelstrom type and objective type games scenarios, because the Balrog can only be in one place, and wherever the Balrog isn't, the army gets run over. Mm-hmm. And keep in mind that there are now a lot more scenarios out there where mobility and being able to go from place to place on the battlefield, from objective to objective, is important.
And this army wants to huddle.
Yeah, this army still is. I mean, this army still is not good at that. So I am not convinced that in the context of a kind of random scenario tournament that this list is a world beater. This list, I think, is, you know, what's going to be interesting is whether this list is more like, more like the Rangers of Ithilien and Goblin Town, where it has enough advantages in enough scenarios that it becomes kind of like a go-to competitive plus.
I think it's gonna be like
army.
Lake Town kind of a thing, where like Lake Town's just like a lot of people take Lake Town kind of a thing.
Lake Town has a lot of advantages over this. I mean, the access to magic.
Well, everything's different, but I'm just saying like that, where like when you think of a competitive force, you think of Lake Town. Like I think you're going to look at this force and you go, this is a competitive force kind of a thing.
I think all of us definitely agree it's competitive, but I do agree with Matt's assessment and Rob's in combination. This is a lot of points denial, but also this army may not function in some mobility scenarios. And so I can see it falling apart, especially Maelstrom. That is a hard weakness because of the Balrog zero might can't control where it goes. And then, I mean, assuming you pick a shaman, I mean, if you don't, then you're spending might trying to get around the Balrog. So,
but even in Maelstrom, you've got the drum and 18 goblins, or 16 goblins, 17 depending. With him, you've got a captain that can Maelstrom with him, and so okay, like 12 of your dudes don't show up where they need to be. And the drum affects the whole battlefield anyway, and so you're still denying all of the secondaries, right?
Yeah, but then in a Maelstrom scenario, if it's heirlooms of ages past, you've got to go lumbering off after the heirloom, and
sure,
and the drum can, if you've got the Blackshield drum, the drum can follow him. If you don't have the Blackshield drum, it can't. And the same thing with hold ground. You got to lumber the Balrog toward the center of the board, and maybe the drum doesn't get there. And do you have the Balrog, if somebody comes on near the Balrog and engages it near the edge, do you have the Balrog kind of fight that fight and never get to the center of the board? So
I think there's some counterplay to this Legion, and I'm interested. That's what I think we'll see it in tournaments. There has been outcries before against things that looked broken on paper and weren't, and then there were things that didn't look broken on paper and were. So it's,
and then there's the Rangers of Ithilien, which look broken on paper and are.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe this is another one. I definitely had the same knee-jerk reaction as Rob, though, but I do have to admit my bias that I already hate the Balrog profile.
I'll give you that. I also hate the Balrog just as much as you do, so I wasn't going to like this anyway.
Yeah, enhancing him in any way.
Matt.
So. All right. We're going to move on to the next army, which is going to be the Black Riders. So I'll move over to Devin for that.
All right. So this Legion is probably one of the most interesting in my mind, despite the fact that I wouldn't play it competitively. Maybe. I don't know. So we'll see. This is an easy one. It's the Witch King of Angmar on a horse. And he can't take anything but a Morgul Blade. Interesting note. The Morgul Blade is a discount. It's 5 points instead of 10. So if you weren't always taking it before, you definitely should now. And then you have a Ring Wraith on horse, and that's it. So the Legion is really obvious. It wants you to take just the 9 riders and go over Middle Earth slaughtering armies with them, which is very thematic. The special rules here, it always has to include the Witch King as the army leader. Then you have the Witch King of Angmar now counts as a hero of legend, probably for the stand fast rule, most likely. And it's a maximum of 9 models that can be in the Legion, which makes sense. So they have a couple abilities that make this playable, and in my mind, one of the more interesting Legions in this book. Terror in the Night, a model in range of between 4 or 6 models
from this force with the Harbinger of Evil special rule suffers an additional -1 to their courage value. A model in range between 7 and 9 models with this force with the Harbinger of Evil special rule suffers an additional -2 to this courage. So only interesting thing I know of there, we'll get into the stacking of minus courage because that's pretty powerful, especially against things like L's. But it is also interesting, it keeps mentioning with Harbinger of Evil. Everything here has Harbinger of Evil, so I imagine that's a call out to Floy. Then the Screech of the Nazgul. Each Ringwraith can, once per game, cast a channeled version of the transfix magical power without declaring a heroic channeling. So interesting thing about that is you don't know what's coming. You don't have to declare it in the move phase. So this magical power is automatically cast, counting as a roll of a 6, and no will points are expended. The target can make a resist test as normal. Make sure to note which Ringwraith models have used this ability, as they can only use this once per game. That is huge, and we'll get into that as well. So the Will of Sauron. Friendly Ringwraith models do not lose a will point for being in combat. That's perfect, makes this playable. Note, however, it doesn't remove the fact that they die when reduced to 0 will. So things like that will still kill you. And then the Ringbearer. At the start of the fight phase, before any other heroic actions are declared, if it is possible for a friendly Ringwraith model to charge an enemy model with the One Ring following a successful heroic combat, the Ringwraith model may declare a heroic combat without spending might. Only one Ringwraith can declare a free heroic combat in this way per turn. So that's interesting. We'll talk about that as well. If successful, the Ringwraith that declared the heroic combat must charge the enemy model with the One Ring, though any other models that were part of the heroic combat can act as normal. The player who declared this free heroic combat automatically wins the roll-off to see which heroic combat goes first, if applicable, though they must select this free heroic combat before any others. So that's it. There's essentially 4 special rules just with a lot of text. Initial thoughts. This Legion it's interesting that they didn't give the Ringwraiths 2 attacks. If you give it 2 attacks, then I would have said this could be competitive. With 1 attack, those horses are now critical. The stacking of Harbinger is mitigated by 2 forces in this game. Number 1 is anything with hordes and low courage. Goblin Town, Mordor, Maurya. They already don't care because they were kind of that you can only reduce them to a minimum of 1. So Harbinger already reduced them from 2 to 1 anyway. So they just use the hordes to keep going. So hordes will hurt this army heavily because that Harbinger stacking has like no effect. The other thing that has no effect are bodyguarded armies. And I say that very specifically. If you have a fearless bubble like Dane or the Balrog or anything like that, let's ignore the Balrog. Anything else other than the Balrog, you can just black tart it to death and you can deny that bonus. So I think there's counterplay there. Bodyguarded forces, however, can take that hero you're bodyguarding and just kind of move them away. And the army becomes a serious threat because even a casual warrior of Gondor or anything is a threat to these Ringwraiths, especially if they can dehorse them. So once you've dehorsed the Ringwraiths, that's game over in my mind.
And it's just a guy in a cloak.
Yeah. So that's why I found it interesting that they didn't give him 2 attacks, so that way the Ringwraiths could whittle down the army a little bit before all the combats got like really gruesome. So basically, as far as Screech of the Nazgul, that's massive. It's basically a hero shutdown. I don't think heroes are going to be doing very much of anything. The most threatening thing to this army are the troops. The heroes are going to be relegated to like near nothing because that's in combination. Like you can cast these magical powers in combination to your 9 race firing a barrage of spells all in a single turn. So going first, if you're already stuck in combat, is going to be huge. You definitely want to re-kit out how you do your Ringwraiths. That's my initial thoughts. What do you guys think?
So is there any point to giving any extra will to these Ringwraiths, or are you just spending points on Might and Fate?
I think you go Might and
Fate.
Fate. I think you just go Might and Fate.
I think that's right.
Yeah. I think you give them will if you're pretty much out of Might and Fate to give.
Yeah, that's right. If you've got like 5 or 10 points left over or whatever, then you're right.
Yeah, you're already
the last thing that you spend points on.
Yeah. Like I don't see any point in really. I think 7 will be plenty. When you're casting this much magic, there is no hero in the game that can take this much abuse.
Yep.
So,
I don't know about you guys, and I know that obviously there's no one's tested this before, but just based on like looking at like obviously how customizable the force is, I think this works much better at lower points than it does higher points, and I mean more like 500 and below kind of a thing, because I think you can get the Witch King in either 4 or 5 ring wraiths on horse at around 500, and then if you want to go lower, obviously you can decrease that. But if you add 6 of them, then you get the -2, and then you're much more likely to kill things with what would that end up being? 13 might at 500 points plus the -2 courage and the transfixes. I think this is much better at lower points than higher points. And I think at lower points, I'm not saying you do extremely well with it, but I definitely think you have much more of a chance to actually win things at lower points with this army.
So the interesting thing about lower points is that you're also dealing with weaker heroes, which means that anything bodyguarding, giving fearless and all that are dropping. And so like dropping in stats. And then you could literally just black dart a hero off the field and remove the bodyguard and all that. So I do think that's another interesting point about lower point tournaments.
I think for me personally, this army does really well at 500 to 400.
Until you run into Rangers of Ithilien.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's the real vulnerability of this army is not just the hordes, but the hordes of shooting.
Yeah.
Because then you start dropping the horses, and the wings fall off of this thing.
I almost wish that they gave the ring wraiths like Horse Lord or something, so that you had some recourse against shooting arm.
Now, do you guys feel? And I know it's a little bit different, obviously, to kind of break the rules, but just for this specific army, do you wish that if you could go below courage 0, so like -1 or -2 kind of a thing? So if you were courage 2, you could go to -1, and you need a 12 to get in.
You can risk creating a negative play experience by making these guys too powerful. Yeah, eventually you're playing a game where you're not moving anything, and your opponent, which is the ring wraith player, just is doing whatever they want. Like the minimum of 1 is a weakness to this army, but in the general game, or are you just saying this is?
Because I guess I'm trying to
move anything.
I'm just trying to, and I get what you're saying, and that makes sense. Yeah. I'm trying to, like what you mentioned with hordes. So if you have Goblin Town, they already didn't care, but if they're at -1, then they really do start to care a little bit, because then I think if I'm correct, they would need a 12 to get in.
If you actually stacked all 3 -1s,
like
Goblin Town, they would be at -1. Like 1, 0, -1, which is a weird stat. Yeah. Would it need 12? I guess
you need a 10. So actually, you need 11 or higher.
Yeah. You might as well just say they can't even charge.
Well, I mean, you need if they're at 0 courage, you need a 10. This just goes to 11 instead of 10. You already have that many models. So it's just
Town.
Yeah, you already have. So it just makes it that little bit much more difficult for an army like that.
I have to imagine they play tested this, and it's possible they may have thought of that. I don't want to think about it too much in the theoretical because it doesn't exist, right? So we're here right now, and hordes are obviously going to be a problem for this army. I mean, how do you beat a horde with this army? Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say that. I mean, this I think becomes one of the premier anti-all hero list.
Oh, this army slaughters hero.
They do not care about the all. What's it called? The all Elven Heroes list kind of thing.
The only thing that will cause problems for them is if they lose heroic moves, because if they're all stuck in combat and you didn't leave race in reserve, then you can get a heroic move and then get tagged, and now you can't cast any magical spells. And almost none of the guys have strike, so an all-hero force could destroy this if they get stuck in. That being said,
I think you're always going to end up with more figures than the all-hero force is going to have.
Yeah.
So you make sure you kind of separate enough so that the worst they could do is tag you in one-on-ones, and then you've got 2, 3, 4 other ring wraiths that are always going to be out. That can then come in and do your spell bombard.
I think all hero lists go down to this pretty fast. I think this is one of those like feeling like almost an auto loss or auto win type of armies, depending on your matchup and scenario.
Well, I think this is a very rock paper scissors army, right?
With the exception of the Breaking of the Fellowship list, which I think would give this a run for its money.
Oh no, this Legion would be destroyed by the Breaking of the Fellowship.
Yeah,
like the Breaking of the Fellowship.
Any army with Fortify Spirit really hurts this Legion, because once you fortify your heroes, it's like okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, but in most cases, other than Breaking of the Fellowship, you can try, if you can figure out a way to kill like Galadriel, Lady of Light, and then or get her down to 0 will, and then all the Fortify Spirits go away.
You got to kill her. Yeah. So the Breaking the Fellowship never lose it.
Yes, exactly.
And so that's. The thing is, if there's a target that the Ringers can go after to shut off some kind of ability, they got a chance. Yeah. And that's why I say that Bodyguard rule is annoying, because Bodyguard, you can move them further away. But this is a Legion that requires an expert player. That's the sad fact about it. You would love to like give this to your wife and say like, here's a fun thematic Legion for you, but there's no way.
Yeah, no.
Clearly Devin's not married.
Right. I can say that. I can say that publicly on the channel without being in trouble later. But yeah, I think this is definitely like
this is definitely a list that will be really fun to play.
I love the thematic narrative of this list, so I will definitely play it for fun.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. We're gonna move on to the next one, or the last one, I should say, which is the Kirith Ungol. So I'll move that over to Matt.
All right. So Kirith Ungol. So this obviously simulates the Kirith Ungol fortress and the orcs and the Uruk-hai that lurk therein, and of course they get a special friend, because we couldn't have a Kirith Ungol list without that special friend. So the army composition is Shagrat, captain of Kirith Ungol, with all of his options. Gorbag, orc captain, with all of his options. So they're the two guys from the Brawl, and their special friend Shelob, who gets a bunch of special rules that we'll talk about in a moment. And with them can come Mordor Uruk-hai captains, orc shamans, orc captains, orc warriors, and Mordor Uruk-hai. So additional special rules, you must always include Shagrat and Gorbag. Shagrat is always the army's leader. Only orc hero models can lead orc warriors. Only Uruk-hai hero models can lead Uruk-hai warriors. Special rules, animosity. Friendly orc models get a bonus of +1 to wound in a fight phase in which they're involved in the same fight as a friendly Uruk-hai model. Friendly Uruk-hai models gain a bonus of +1 to wound in a fight phase if they're involved in the same fight as a friendly orc model. I don't think it says this specifically as it does in the Ugluk Legion special rule, but I'm assuming that only means if you're actually engaged in model-to-model contact, as opposed to if you have an orc with a spear backing up an Uruk-hai.
Yeah, you're not in combat. Mm-hmm. Wait, does it say in the same fight?
Involved in the same fight as a friendly Uruk-hai.
But spears never count as being involved in the fight, so it wouldn't work on.
Whoa.
Well, spears don't count as being in combat. Can somebody take a look at? Does
I don't
anybody
have the rule book on me, because I know to be in combat, you have to be in base phase, but to be in the fight. You are in the fight because a banner affects anyone in the fight, and spears can re-roll that.
All right, so we're going to put a pin in this and come back to it, because I want to. I'll go. I'm using the electronic version here, so I'll need to go off of this to take a look at Gondor at War. But let me read through the rest of the rules, and then I'll go and research that. So, next special rule is rivals for power. Keep track of how many models Gorbag and Shagrat have each killed. If at any point one of them has fewer kills than the other, that model may re-roll a single d6 when making a dual roll. And then we get to the fun rule. She hungers for sweeter meats. Shelob adds 1 to her attack characteristic when involved in a fight with an enemy man, elf, dwarf, or hobbit. So when Shelob is fighting good stuff, she goes from 1 attack to 2 attacks, or 3 attacks on the charge, which makes her a whole lot scarier.
If that were not enough, tasty.
She is I guess so. She is always hungry at the start of the move phase. So long as she is not engaged in the fight, Shelob can choose to kill and remove a friendly model within 1 inch of her from the board. If she does so, Shelob can reroll any number of dice when making a dual roll. So this turns her into a even scarier model when she uses this. So obviously, even though Shagrat and Gorbag are the ones that you have to take in this list, Shelob is the centerpiece of the list, and you are never going to be taking this list without her, because this list is really all about her, even though she's not in the name. So why don't you guys discuss, and I'm going to go research this animosity special rule and see what I can learn.
This is by far my favorite of the legions, and I'm really excited about pretty much every rule that there is. Now, obviously, Matt's looking into the plus ones. If the plus ones apply, you are almost every time you're taking Spear's back rank, and Mortal Uruk-hai in the front, and both models are going to get +1 to wound every time.
I almost don't even want to discuss it because that's so gross. That's so gross that
Mortal
I'm like,
Uruk-hai,
unless it actually is worded that way. Because that's
Mortal Uruk-hai, strength 4, fight 4, +1 to wound. I mean, that's pretty. And then, to be fair,
you'd have an Orc Spear support behind Shagrat and an Uruk-hai. Oh, Gorbag wouldn't get anyone. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you could put him in a fight with another.
Yeah, with another Uruk. Yeah. But,
yeah, and then he goes. And the great thing, and one thing we got to keep in mind, I think, and this isn't going to be the case all the time, of course, but most of the time, I think most people would expect Shagrat to have more kills. Yeah. So if Gorbag can get into a fight with multiple models, he's fight 5, 3 attacks, and he rerolls a dice automatically most of the time because he's probably going to be less kills than Shagrat. So essentially, if you can get Gorbag in the right positions, Gorbag's going to be very good at killing things as well as Shagrat. And Shagrat, I mean, Shagrat's always been one of those models where he's just a really, really solid profile when you look at him. I mean, the ability to get might back if you kill heroes, knock people down at all times. You never lose the ability to knock people down if you charge. He's a very solid hero. And with him having a 3/3/3 stat line at defense 7 too, I mean, Shelob is – I love this list. What do you guys think?
Wait, just so I could jump in, I went back to look at Rohan at War, and the animosity rule is exactly the same as the one that's in the Ugluk's Scouts list. So I think even though the little blurb in the desires notes isn't there, I think we have to assume that it does apply. And the only thing that you count is when you're in base-to-base contacts. So
there's a blurb.
Give a +1 to wound.
So it clarifies that in Rohan at War is what you're saying.
It clarifies that in Rohan at War, but it clarifies it in the designer's notes.
Gotcha. Okay.
That clarification does not appear in the designer's notes here, but I think since the rule is worded identically to the one in the Ugluk list, that we have to assume that same designer's note applies.
So it probably will be an FAQ, but until then, Spear Sports
this is the same problem with Mirkwood Rangers, right? Where like based on the wording, they can't actually count spear supports as being in the fight for extra attacks because they clarified that, right?
Yeah.
Was that worded the same way?
Actually, that's an interesting note if someone wants to look that up too. But I mean, realistically, that's probably right.
The Ugluk's thing, I think, answers it. I mean, it is also a rule called animosity. It is word for word the same rule.
Then yeah, so it's going to be argued as such. So we might as well not even bother looking at other examples. But so okay, even knowing that you have to be in combat, close combat, in order to do it, this is actually a really good Legion. I think thematically, it's already one of the most exciting ones. So I absolutely love the theme behind this. And as far as power-wise, I actually think this is a competitive Legion. Like, Magic causes it a lot of problems because you only have, like, 2 heroes with Heroic Strike. Then you have Shelob, which she doesn't really need it. But, I mean, yeah, if Gorbag gets taken out, and I say Gorbag because he's a little easier to take out than Shagrat, then it kind of depowers the Legion a little bit. But, I mean, other than that, I actually really like this Legion. It's got thematic rules. It just makes Shelob a little bit more scarier. It, thank God, had the Shaman. It's one issue with the Blackgate Legion is it doesn't have a Shaman.
Now, if Shagrat were to die and he had more kills, does Gorbag still get that effect?
It depends on the routing. So keep track of the amount of...
Yeah.
If at any point one has fewer than the other...
Just keep track of what they've killed is what it says.
You just keep track of it. So until Gorbag, like...
evens out.
Yeah, he keeps it, as far as I'm concerned.
It sounds like that, yeah. So if neither one of them dies and they were lower, then the other one still gets the reroll.
The other one keeps the bonus, until he catches up. Which I expect Shagrat to be higher.
Yes,
usually.
he should. He should. Right.
I mean, basically, other than that.
Now, one question I want to ask you guys: with the Mortal Uruk-hai, with them already being 8 points base, do you take the shield for an extra point at defense 5? Is the shield worth it to make them 9 points, or do you just stick with kind of a let's assume that the orcs will get the +1 kind of thing? Do you just go defense 4 front and back, whereas the defense 5
the shield?
Yeah, you always want to take the shield.
You take the shield, okay?
Yeah, because otherwise they get shot to death. The break between defense 4 and defense 5 against shooting is huge.
I think you can sprinkle in a few two-handed weapons to get +2 to wound from time to time, but generally you take shields.
Plus, the shielding special rule is one of the most useful ones in the game, and it can be game-winning, so it's nice when you can sprinkle that around. Interesting note that the Mordor Uruk-hai do not have Uruk bows, which I guess maybe they're from Mordor. Now, that's consistent with the main rulebook, but I just didn't even realize that until I read it.
That's a good point, though. Yeah, if they did have Uruk bows, that would have made them really interesting. Most likely, you're going to take Shagrat, Gorbag, Shelob. Do you go with a Mordor Uruk-hai captain and then fill them out with as many Mordor Uruk-hai as the 4th person, or do you take the Orc captain and go Orc spears in the back?
That's going to be dependent on points and how much you're trying to save, but I do think I don't have the profile, and I'm probably going to have to look it up, but I believe the Mordor Uruk-hai captain is going to be fight 5. If it's like the same stats as Isengard, then I always go the Mordor Uruk-hai captain.
So you'd rather take the Mordor Uruk-hai at 9 point, a bunch of 9 point Mordor Uruk-hai, because the Orc captain is very cost effective, and then the ability to take a bunch of spears in the back is always a very good thing to have as well.
I'm trying to look for them. Mordor Uruk-hai captain's fight 5, strength 5. Oh yeah, that's
you take the Uruk-hai captain.
Yeah,
the reason you take the Orc captain is if you can put him on a warg, and there's no warg in this list.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which I guess is something I should have said, is the Orc captain cannot be on warg.
Yeah, actually, that's a good shout, Matt. The fact that, because I was then wondering, why do we ever take Orc captains then?
We put Orc captains on wargs.
Yeah.
So Shelob, you guys happy with the rules? Not happy with the rules?
I'm happy with it.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. And I like the way that they've rooted the sweeter meats rule, because it just keys off of keywords, so it also works against Easterlings and Haradrim, because there's men.
That's a good point.
So it's not really all
cut
good.
Off all evil armies.
That's true. Yeah,
that's a really good point, actually. Yeah.
Which she really didn't care about them either. So.
Black Numenorians.
Dunlendings must be really tasty, for example.
Ruffian.
Yeah, there's a lot of men in the game, even amongst the evil ranks. There's a lot of men.
That's a good point. Yeah, and I think a lot of people are going to look at that and maybe they forget that it's not just all good armies. There are evil men. There are evil.
Yeah, because it doesn't say good.
No, it does not. You're indeed correct.
Enemies with these keywords.
So your evil hobbits, you can take them out.
Well, that Ruffian Legion with evil hobbits.
I was going to say there are evil hobbits.
There are evil hobbits. You can eat them.
Yep.
So,
and they are yummy.
I think we only don't have an evil dwarf and no, we have an evil dwarf. We have Thrain. So we just don't have an evil elf. So, give us an evil elf, Games Workshop.
Do you, with Shelob's second rule about the rerolling any number of dice, do you do that every turn or only in certain situations?
Every turn she's in combat.
Every turn she's in combat. Even if she doesn't get the charge?
Yes, I think especially if she doesn't get the charge.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you take a cheapo squad with a shaman of 6 bare naked orcs, and they're literally snacks.
Yeah. And you just factor that into your break limit. I mean, you wouldn't use it literally every turn, but in turns where it matters, she just they stand around her and provide food.
Now, can you imagine the internal conversations amongst those orcs as they're sitting there going, why are we here, guys? They didn't even bother to give us weapons. Let's cheer the other guys on. I don't know. I'm really confused.
Did you guys also get called in for a shareholders meeting?
And then the first guy gets eaten. Oh my God!
We should run. No, we were told to stay right next to that giant spider.
Now, what was it? With I'm assuming you get the banner reroll as well with that, because it's kind of like that whole Immerhill kind of thing where
Well, you can't reroll a reroll.
Yeah.
Under any
you can't, but that's the thing. With dwarves, right? You have the King's Champion as the banner, right? And then Dern has an ability to re-roll.
No, he's re-rolling a different dice.
The same die. You can re-roll different dice. If you have a special ability that allows you to re-roll all your dice,
Banner's
like Shelob has here, the banner is.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Gotcha. Because you re-roll.
The same thing with.
Well, actually, it says re-roll any number of dice.
Yeah, you can re-roll all of them then.
Yeah,
so
I see
all of them. Then the banner
that wouldn't make sense.
The only reason you don't want to re-roll all your dice is if like you've tied with one die, and you don't want to sacrifice that tie and re-roll all of them and botch.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You still bring the banner, by the way. I mean,
for Shagrad,
Warbag, and also the turns where you don't do that rule.
Yeah, that's true.
But it just when she does it, to just move the banner somewhere else.
Makes sense.
But other than that, I mean, I don't have a whole hell of a lot to say about the Legion. I think on paper it's very strong. I think this is a competitive Legion. Like I would go into competitive tournaments with this.
I think it's great.
I like it. I'm very happy with this one.
Yeah, this is one of the best ones in the book, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm really happy with this. All right, so we're going to move on to the last two profiles, so I'll move it over to Rob.
Yes. Go ahead.
Just curious, for the audience, because maybe even curious, your favorite Legion, before we move into the two profiles, favorite Legion, mine has got to be this one. You guys can pick this one as well, but I would say easily this one or the Lurtz one. Or, well,
I like all five.
I haven't played the Ringwraith one, but I'll say this one. Go ahead. What's up? You said what? What's one, Tim?
I like all five a lot. If I had to pick a favorite,
technically six, but
yeah, true. That's right, six. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yep. If I had to pick one, I think I would go with
thematically.
I would go with the Riders personally because they were never really playable before, and now they have because you could basically put together this Kirithungel list if you wanted to.
That's very true.
You couldn't do the Riders, so I think my favorite list in terms of what I'd want to play the most is the Kirithungel, but I think the best list is the Riders because it makes them playable.
I'm going to vote for the Breaking the Fellowship. That's my favorite one.
For me, it's very close between Kirithungel and the Breaking of the Fellowship, but I think I'm also going to vote for the Breaking of the Fellowship.
Oh, come on. You want to say Depths of Mourya.
Yeah, I know.
Depths of Mourya is the best thing to have.
I'm very happy with the Depths of Mourya. I like the Balrog.
I'll play it at a couple tournaments and see how it goes because I have fears.
But again, I think a lot of that is wrapped up in my just general hatred of the Balrog as a profile, much like Devin. So I'm definitely not completely unbiased.
So I guess now we go into the most broken profiles in the game. Let's go ahead.
A bartender and a guy with a lamp.
I think we're about to break the meta wide open here, guys.
Yeah.
But this is really game-changing stuff. So these two new profiles, everybody probably knows that they exist just because they've been shown off on the various social media pages that Games Workshop has. It's Barleyman Butterbur, the barman that greets the hobbits in Bree, and Harry Goatleaf, the man who absolutely loves doors. So Barleyman Butterbur and Harry Goatleaf are both minor heroes. Barleyman is a fight 3, shoot 4, strength 3, defense 4, 1 attack, 2 wound, 4 courage hero. He's got 1-3-2 as his Might Will Fate. He has a cudgel. His heroic actions are resolve and defense. And he has 2 special rules. His first special rule is Barleyman Butterbur at your service. During his move phase, if Barleyman Butterbur is in base contact with a friendly hero model, he can spend a will point to use this ability. If he does, roll a d6. On a 5+, the hero regains a wound lost earlier in the battle. If Barleyman Butterbur uses this special rule on a hero from the Fellowship Army list, they will regain a lost wound on a 4+ instead. And then his second rule is called Build the Pony. You may include Bill the Pony in the same force as Barleyman as long as he was part of Barleyman's warband, even if your force doesn't include Sam. If Bill the Pony is taken as part of Barleyman's warband, then he will only cost 10 points rather than 25. Additionally, Barleyman may benefit from Bill the Pony's official meals and second breakfast special rule. He also has a list of who he can ally with, so he's historical with the Fellowship, convenient with the Shire, Rangers, Minas Tirith, Fiefdoms, Dead of Dunharrow, Rohan, Wild Men of Druadan, Rivendell, Lothlorien, Halls of Thranduil, Fangorn, and the Misty Mountains, and he has impossible allies with everybody else. And then the second profile is Harry Goatleaf.
Well, but did you want to just comment on Barleyman real quick?
Yeah, let's talk about Barleyman, who thank God they made him convenient allies with the Dead of Dunharrow, because I've always wanted to include him in that list.
I always wanted to see him come to the Stone of Eric and be like, pint for the dead.
Did you mention his heroic actions, by the way?
Yes, I did, and their resolve and defense.
Yeah. How does that work? I mean, so what's going on with the heroic resolve? Is he basically saying this round's on the house, and all of a sudden that makes everybody around him resist magic better?
I mean, considering that the one scene we see him, he's cowering from the ring wraiths behind a desk. It's like resolve to me.
Yeah, and then the heroic defense, which I guess he's using that mug of beer that he has in his right hand to parry with lightning fast speed every attack that comes in at him.
Hey, you know what?
And I'm gonna also say, to your point here, he's a fat old villager. How does he fight 3 and defense 4? Like, does he stuff like bread rolls in his shirt to make him harder to like?
Rob, we don't fat shame here. What are you doing? Come on, Lane, really? Wow.
Look, the thing is, when you spend a life as a bartender, your training as a Gondor warrior is irrelevant.
Yes, he needs a horse because he needs to join the Rohirrim. He's better than them.
Okay, so funny things about his profile side. It is a little bit of a bizarre profile. There's 2 things that I'm going to mention. Number 1 is the build a pony rule. So a lot of people online have been saying, should you bring him to get build a pony in? I personally would argue no. I love build a pony, and I really wanted to get him in a Shire list. I'm sorry, clarification, in a Shire list. I don't know if I said that. But I would say no. And the reason why is because you're paying 50 points, and yeah, you're getting Bill, but he doesn't count as a banner for purposes of scenario. He is a banner, but Will Whitfoot for 25 points does a very similar effect for a larger radius, and I get it, it's temporary. But the thing is, Barleyman isn't doing anything. Like, he's got 1 might. Not really sure if he can use his abilities, but that 5-up wound thing he does is a gimmick in a Shire force. I'm not really seeing it for 50 points as an investment. I mean, that's a lot of hobbits. Like, that's a lot of hobbits. So
you can call it heroic resolve.
Yeah, then that's true.
Kevin, that's worth every point. What are you talking about?
So I think Barleyman was very clearly intended for a fellowship list. I think Bill the Pony's official meals. There's another rule he has where he can. I forgot if it works on everybody, or just the fellowship. Like where they can. Is it hobbits? Official, you can regain a single point of might. Well, yeah, every turn, a single member of the fellowship. So once again, you can't even use that rule. This is very clearly a fellowship ally, not a Shire ally. So you can do it. It's cute, but it's not like something I think is a good idea. The other thing.
Is this an attempt to correct the record from when Barleyman Betterbur, the 10th member of the Fellowship, was like edited out of the official history?
Yeah, if everyone didn't know, Tolkien actually wrote it in there.
Yeah, there's an initial draft with Barleyman Betterbur as the 10th member of the Fellowship. We thought 9 was an odd number, and we just couldn't go with that.
Guys, this is for your fantasy fellowships. I expect to see this guy in your fantasy fellowships.
This is who you draft first.
I think that this guy is clearly a super cool thing to have in the game in terms of narrative for narrative scenarios. I think that his model is outstanding. And I love the idea that he's basically like the Middle Earth equivalent of a food truck, where he just a pony with a bunch of food in any army, like, 20 cents a pint, and who wants a pint, right? And then on to the next army.
He's in the middle of the Battle of the Pelennor and just
he's
being
he's the guy that drives the gut truck. That's exactly what he is.
So, I don't have a lot to say about him competitively. I think it's a stretch to really make him worth it. I think it's worth including him in the game. I think the stat creep is hysterical, but,
Kevin, I want to see Barleyman Butterbur with Bill the Pony outside Nova next year as one of the food trucks.
There you go. I'm going to make it happen.
I mean, that would be the biggest hit that you could ever possibly do, is just put a pony out there with a guy serving stuff.
Now, as another note, this is the second thing I wanted to point out, and this is just a theory, but he's a minor hero.
Mm-hmm.
Why? So, I have a theory. Possible allusion to maybe Bree soldiers or ruffian Bree guys or whatever later on.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe they couldn't make the model for it, and so therefore didn't release a profile for it.
Wait a second here. If he's a minor, and this may be how the Wanderers of the Wild works.
Oh yeah, the Wanderers don't need to follow the rules for the whole Hero Valor thing. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Because otherwise he couldn't. He couldn't ally into the Dead of Dunharrow list, as I have always wanted him.
No, they ignore it because Tom Bombadil's an independent character, Yep. So, but basically, it's just a thought because both him and Harry Goatleaf are minor characters.
Well, and on that point, though,
minor heroes. I mean,
Harry Goatleaf is also a ruffian, so it makes more sense for him.
Well, it makes more sense on him. Yeah, true. Yeah.
So now, should we talk to the only guy we are less likely to put in an army?
Yeah, let's go ahead and talk about Harry Goatleaf.
Are you ready for the true Return of the King? So we've got Harry Goatleaf, who is a minor hero, and as I mentioned, has two crucial keywords: ruffian, so that he can be taken as a ruffian, and man, so that Shelob can eat him. He's got normal, stats: fight 3, shoot 4, strength 3, defense 3, which seems more appropriate. 1 attack, 2 wounds, 3 courage, and then 1 might, 3 will, 1 fate. He has a dagger and a lantern. The lantern is a special rule, actually, which ironically is listed above the special rules section under war gear. But the lantern, you can use it. The area within 12 inches radius of Harry Goatleaf is illuminated as if it were daylight. Models within this area can be seen clearly unless another special rule would prevent them from doing so. So he makes it even easier to kill you in Clash by Moonlight. And then his other special rule is Gatekeeper. During the priority phase, after priority has been rolled, Harry Goatleaf may spend a point of will to use the special rule. If he does so, select one enemy infantry model within 6 inches in line of sight of Harry Goatleaf and roll a d6. On a 3+, the chosen model cannot move that turn, though they can still do anything else they would normally be able to do. Harry may use might to influence this roll. Monster models are unaffected by this special rule. And his allies section is that he can be taken as either good or evil. If taken as good, he's historical with the Fellowship, which I don't understand that either, because he literally only let half of them in and didn't want to.
He was like another stand-in that Tolkien left out by accident.
He clearly is the one who scared off all the ring wraiths in Bree, so he's a crucial member of the story. He's convenient with the Rangers, Minas Tirith, Fiefdoms, Dead of Dunharrow, Rohan, Wildmen of Druidon, Rivendell, Lothlorien, Fanghorn, and the Misty Mountains. He's impossible with everyone else. If he's taken as an evil model, he counts as a hero of fortitude and can be taken as part of Sharky's Rogues and also included in the Chief's Ruffians Legendary Legion.
Can I talk a bit about the Lantern rule, which I think may be the most poorly thought through rule that Games Workshop
Why
has
can
ever
you
created
not
for
turn
this
it
game?
off? Why can you not turn it off?
Turn it off.
It's so
Harry, they're shooting at us. Turn it off. I can't.
So just to be clear, here's the problem. So this was intended, according to Jay Clare, to give you an advantage in the Clash by Moonlight scenario, so that you could use Harry Goatleaf as a spotter, where he takes his lantern up within 12 inches of the target you want to shoot at. Then you can see him. Then you can shoot at him. Of course, as anybody with any military experience knows, when you're carrying a light in the middle of a dark night, you can see a little bit farther, but everyone anywhere can see you. Mm-hmm. And that is the exact problem, is that Harry Goatleaf is going to start out initially in the middle of your army and illuminate all of it. So in the Clash by Moonlight scenario, the first things that's going to happen is arrows will rain down on your entire army.
It's going to look like 300.
And by the way, you can't shoot back.
Yeah,
that's right. You can't shoot back. You
cannot shoot back.
Everybody in your army is going to be desperately running away from Harry Goatleaf.
Oh, amazing.
This needs to be FAQ'd or eroded. It's like, why can you not turn? Like when I read that rule too, I was like, wait, you can't turn the rule off.
And you know what's even better about it? It's a passive special rule, so you
can't turn it off
if you get proned or something, right?
Yeah, exactly.
There's nothing you can do to turn it off.
Anyway, never take Harry Goatleaf. Moving on.
Yeah, I don't think there's a lot to say. Again, I think the model is absolutely outstanding. I think it's cool that, you can add him to a ruffian list, even though you never, ever would. I think it makes it absolutely even worse to play the legendary Ruffian Legion because you have to take all of the characters, right? And then you can start taking war bands, and so you would be forced to take him.
But no one takes the Legion of the Ruffians anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So I think
if you wanted to, and if you wanted to make sure that you could be targeted by shooting, no matter what scenario you're playing, he's the guy to take.
Absolutely.
The person who takes this with that Legion, he's like, I want you to do better in the tournament. I want you to do better in the tournament. He's just giving up.
I think I now understand why he's actually historical with the Fellowship, because he's essentially like an inside man, right? He's working with the hobbits all along during the scouring.
So I don't understand Barliman or this guy being historical with the Fellowship for one major reason. There was the Fellowship, I believe, you couldn't ally them historically with what's it called? The Lothlorien Legion. And a lot of people were upset about that. Well, Jay clarified and said, well, the Fellowship was disbanded by the time they got to... Or no. Yeah, by the time Helm's Deep happened, the Fellowship was gone. So that was just the 3 hunters. So a Legion will take care of that. All right, fine. Fair enough example. The Fellowship did not exist when they met these two. So this is totally inconsistent with the same logic. So I'm like, why are they historical with those groups?
Harry Goatleaf has always existed, Devin. He's the Tom Bombadil we always wanted.
So I also do want to say one quick thing on his Gatekeeper special rule where he can prevent one infantry model from not moving. And when I read this rule, what I immediately thought of was a scene from the movie The Naked Gun. Have any of you guys ever seen that movie? I may be dating myself here. It's a movie.
No, I've seen it.
Yeah, it's a movie from the 80s. So there's a scene at the beginning where Officer Nordberg, played by O.J. Simpson, no less, is going to break in on a meeting between, like 2 criminal organizations. And he screws up going through the door, puts his foot through the door, has to spend about a minute freeing himself before he opens the door. And by the time he opens the door, everybody in the room is pointing a gun at him. And then he immediately holds up his badge and says, everybody drop your weapons. And one guy does. And then it looks around sheepishly at everybody else. And that's the way what I immediately thought of when I saw this rule, is where Harry Goatleaf goes to the horde of charging orcs. Stop right there. One guy does. Let's kind of turn and look confused at that one guy and then proceed to run Harry Goatleaf through.
And then that's the one guy that gets eaten by Shelob.
Oh.
Yeah, so I think that narratively super cool, awesome model. Great to have it in the game, but since this is a competitive podcast, moving on, right?
Yeah. And if anyone ever thinks we're being negative about like profiles and whatnot, like always remember we are trying to analyze these from a competitive perspective. So that's when you see a feel like, yeah.
Don't take it to a tournament.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So.
All right. Thank you for tuning in this week. Let us know in the comments section which of the Legendary Legions is your favorite and what you're looking forward to most. And we look forward to seeing you next week.
Everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.